You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Hey everybody, hi, this is Mike Balzer from All Things 3D, and this actually is a special episode. We did an interview with High Fidelity. If you're not familiar with them, they do the Metaverse, and I came across them because I was doing some research for something I was doing at the OMSI in November, and found that they're using their Metaverse to actually provide training and information. In fact, the one that I had seen, they were doing a kind of a tour of the Nefertari Tomb. You may be familiar with that from SteamVR. This is their version of it, where they actually had an Egyptologist provide expert information that you could ask questions for, and there was interaction with other people. I thought it was an excellent opportunity to find out more. So hopefully you'll enjoy this interview with Ryan and High Fidelity, and hopefully I'll make it back out. Bye. Wow, this is fantastic. So I'm Mike Balzer from All Things 3D, and this is a special episode that we're going to be presenting later today on 3D in Review. But if you're watching it for the first time, it's now. So I don't know who I have in front of me, but obviously it's an avatar of one of the developers here at High Fidelity. So kind of tell us a little bit about High Fidelity and where you're located and a little bit more about the company itself.
Sure. Well, first let me introduce myself. My name is Ryan Karpf. I'm one of the co-founders of High Fidelity, and I'm also the Chief Creative Officer here. Oh. So what I do basically is I have a team of people, and we're sort of like a small studio inside the larger company, and we're made up of producers and artists and developers and QA people, and our mandate basically is to build experiences on top of the High Fidelity platform and kind of show people and new developers, what's possible to build on top of our platform. We also work with other people outside developers and outside companies to collaboratively build experiences that might be of interest to people and show the world what's possible on High Fidelity. So that's a little bit about me. Okay. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, yesterday I actually got an opportunity to experience this, and one of the reasons that I'm even aware of High Fidelity, I was doing some research because I used the version created by Curiosity that's now in the SteamVR world that provides a very realistic internal plus presentation of Nefertari's tomb. But I also noticed during my research that your company actually has brought an Egyptologist to be involved in the process, and then you do tours or presentations having a lot of avatars, and I obviously got to experience that yesterday, and I was just blown away, as my audience is probably going to see in a few minutes, or actually if we're watching this, they're seeing it now. But I'm looking at you, so I may switch from the footage that you're giving me, and I'm looking at you. Your eyes are blinking. They're gazed and looking at me. Your mouth moves when you talk, and I'm assuming the same case on my end. And as you nod your head in confirmation, I feel like I'm interacting with another human being instead of just a blasé avatar as we've seen in real life and other things. So there's a lot of interaction. And watching the Egyptologist give her presentation, I saw the same nuances. As, for instance, I use my hands a lot, and obviously they're moving now. And I guess if I press certain buttons on my hand controllers, I can actually move things. And I think I could point to, but I don't know which one does that.
Yeah, actually, if you reach out your hand, are you using an Oculus or a Vive?
I'm using a Vive.
So the secondary trigger that's down by your palm, if you squeeze that while we hold hands here, we'll sort of do our version of a handshake in High Fidelity.
And I got an opportunity to try that yesterday,
yeah,
which is cool. So now we're connected.
We can find each other and connect in High Fidelity. Yeah, so what you're talking about is really sort of core to the company's goals, which is, simply put, it's trying to make VR more human. So all of the things that you're talking about, us being able to look at each other, nod when we're, talking, sort of use our hands, all this information that we're sending each other in High Fidelity is critical to, effective communication. And that was really when we started the company. Those were kind of the things that we were focused on very early, is sort of realizing that, we could get the latency so low that, you're in Portland, I'm in San Francisco, but you could be in China or London, and I could be here in San Francisco, and we still would be able to communicate with each other in this way, which is, we're just getting so much wonderful information, and that is sort of new, or I should say new again, to technology, right, is that we've been looking at, things like you mentioned, like Second Life, on a screen and sort of walking these characters around, and we sort of put ourselves in those characters, but this is very different. That we're very present with each other, and so we're
doing less projection and more immersive opportunity. Now again, right. Since I'm a first-person character, I can see my hands and look down and see my body.
Right.
So let me kind of push back to one of my questions. Is clearly you're on the cutting edge. So probably one of the questions my audience might have is, what kind of platform are you working with? Many of them use Unity or Unreal. So obviously this, from what I've read, it's open source. So is this a custom platform? If so, what is it initially based on?
Yeah, so everything is built by us. We aren't using Unity or Unreal or any other rendering engine like that. Everything is built, from the ground up to be used to be sort of infinitely scalable, decentralized, things that we think are really sort of critical for the metaverse to thrive. So we're kind of using a series of servers and a client, right? And so the servers are like an entity server that is rendering or holding all of the objects. There's an avatar mixer that is, taking our audio and combining it and sending it to each other. There's a messaging mixer that can send messages and make objects sort of talk to each other and be interactive. So there's a series of mixers that we're using, and then, obviously we've got a client that's rendering all this stuff.
You use the term sandbox. Is that kind of what we're in now?
This, we wouldn't call this a sandbox. Sandbox is kind of like a free building environment. I would say that that's how we use that term, high fidelity. So, I touched upon this a little earlier. This is a server that high fidelity operates. But, you may decide that you want to build your own content and you want to either open it up to the public, or you just want to invite, a small group of people, or maybe you're a company and it's more like an intranet. So you've got, employees and you only want them to have access. So for us, it was really important to build and architect the system in a way where you could have complete control over your sandbox, or maybe at some point you say, this is no longer a sandbox, this is really a place that, I want to build and expand and allow people to come in. So we sort of use the term sandbox as maybe the place that you fool around and sort of learn how to use the technology. And then we use the word domain, which is kind of what we're in now, as a place that, holds a lot of content and experiences and allows people to connect to it. And again, like I said, you can decide to operate that on your own and have nothing to do with High Fidelity, the company, and you're just operating it and inviting people in yourself, or you can kind of connect it up to the metaverse and allow it to be discoverable in a way where through our client or another client, somebody could search for things that, could be like Tomb, for example, and a domain like this would come up. And just like a web link, you'd be able to click it and immediately go there. So
you can have disparate clouds, let's just call them. So if I had my own environment cloud, I could use your directory system to connect to it. So they would basically come into your, what you call it, your portal, your initial lobby, and then I could be able to go. I noticed there were tunnels. Would this be kind of that metaphor that your tunnel would allow them to go out to my server? Do you have that capability, or do I have to house it all within your environment?
No, so what we can't display now, because each of us has our own, but we have kind of each of us has like a tablet that we can bring up, and there's a lot of apps.
I'll go ahead and bring up mine.
Right, so if you bring up your tablet, you'll see one of the apps that's on there is called GoTo. Oh, you just changed your avatar. I think you clicked on one of those avatars over there.
Oh, well, that's kind of nice, I guess.
Yeah, so you can immediately change your look, just like that, which I think was one of your other questions that you wanted to touch upon, which is how easy is it to, change or customize the way that you look. And as you can see, it's very easy. Mm-hmm. Anyway, what I was saying is you can bring up your tablet. There is a app that is called GoTo, and that's kind of like our search, right? It's like going to Google's homepage, right, and typing something in the string there and getting all these results, where those results would be domains. So, for example, if you, like you said, had one, you don't have to create a physical portal and put it somewhere for somebody to walk through. You can just connect it up to our metaverse and make it discoverable. And then all sorts of things can be found out about it. So they do a search
like you would do on the web. And
exactly.
Then click on it and immediately...
Oh, off you go. So there again, it's very different from something like Unity or Unreal, where you have to build the experience, package it up, deploy it onto a channel, you know what I mean? And then those people have to download all of that. This is more like the web, where you immediately go and then you start to, over the network, render all this stuff in real time.
Well, on that note, as you're probably aware, WebVR is kind of, I wouldn't say taken off, but has become more notable as language improves, and we've seen both Firefox now have a VR component that's being presented in the Oculus Go and a few others. And then if you're probably familiar with Sketchfab, a lot of their structure is also built on WebVR now. Is that a component here, or is it, again, distinct and more nuts and bolts structure so that performance is improved?
Yeah, this is distinct, and I think there were many reasons why we did that. I'm not a developer myself, so I'm not sure I can confidently speak to a lot of those, but I know that there were a lot of things that we wanted to do with audio and things like that that at the time sort of weren't possible.
Okay. Now, I've only touched on the developer kit that you have, the SDK, and some of the instructions. One of them was actually trying to create an avatar for myself, but having only a few hours, it is right now a process, but I was told by Christina that in the future you will have a pipeline to make that process easier, allowing people to have avatars that look much more like themselves. And as I just did accidentally, I was able to change mine instantly into, I think I had a female character. So you can role play, I guess would be a word. And as I mentioned, there were other things that weren't human in form, robots. I guess the term is furries. So clearly you do allow some disassociation there. But with this new pipeline, one of the things that I question, let's go back to the nuts and bolts. We have shading, but also at the same time, I noticed the shading isn't as realistic, and it's probably based upon performance. I think I've got all my settings fairly high, or maybe it's just in this particular area. It's I wouldn't use the word cartoonish, it's just a little bit more flat shading. But I do notice our characters ourselves, and your instructions show that they could be imported from Mixamo, and Mixamo actually has a fairly large texture for the clothing, the body, and so forth, with your diffuse layer, your I guess you have...
Sure, your bump maps and your...
Thank you. Your normal mapping and so forth. Can we kind of talk a little bit, how detailed can that be? I mean, looking at you, you don't really have a lot of an alpha in your hair per se, but I did notice, and I don't know if you've got any eyelashes. Hopefully, I'm looking closely.
That's
so I hope that doesn't make you uncomfortable.
Yeah, so you want me to talk a little bit about the flexibility we have with our avatars? So, we really wanted to, as a platform, be as agnostic as possible and use, as far as, what could, the range of things that are possible on our platform. So we could go to another domain and it might look like, an 80s video game, kind of that kind of shading and that kind of aesthetic. And then the avatar that you're wearing, for example, is highly realistic, all the way down to subsurface scattering channel on your avatar as well. So there's kind of a full range that's possible. And we also use common file formats like FBX and OBJ and things like that. So your popular authoring tools like Maya and Blender and 3D Studio Max are all things that you can create avatars with. Use things like PBR textures, which can be really super realistic, or those materials look very realistic. Or you can go the other way. And again, it's not our job as a platform to kind of say what you want your environment or your domain to look like. We just wanted to give you as many possibilities as possible, we could give you. And so for that reason, you'll see a huge range, when you go from place to place, which, I think for some people, they find that charming, and for other people, they may want to lock that down so that there's only a single aesthetic. And again, if it was your domain, you would have some control over that.
Well, and again, because people aren't going to be able to hear me right now, so you might have to relay my questions back to me. I noticed that there were selections for performance. So if your machine was on the lower end, you could throttle it down. Is this also automatic based upon your bandwidth performance as well?
Yeah, we have some LOD logic built into the platform. So when you bring content in, you have the ability to kind of what we call bake it. And when you do, it takes your large textures and creates different levels of detail for them, and it does the same thing for your models. So when you come in, depending on your bandwidth and depending on your performance, you're going to get sort of the lowest level of detail, and then progressively get higher levels depending on what either your personal settings are or just what you can handle. So we do have that.
Okay. So as mentioned, they can't hear me, so I'm going to relay another question. Mm-hmm. What do you think is, and just relay it back once I ask a question, what would you say the optimal or the minimal performance from your bandwidth that you're expecting? I think I have about a 2 megabit, actually a 200, but about a 1 meg, 2 meg upload. So if you want to relay that back to me, what is...
Yeah, so as far as minimum spec about, bandwidth, we usually try to recommend something like 20 down, 10 up, you know what I mean, as something that, should be good enough for you to have a good experience. Again, because this is user-generated content, some people, are just going to, put models in here with huge numbers of triangles or textures that are 4K or 8K or things like that. And, we don't want to necessarily stop them doing that. But, it could take a long time for you to download some of the content depending on what your bandwidth is.
So let's relay that back again. So do you have guidelines for those who want to venture into developing their own sandboxes or environments? What is optimal? You mentioned texture side. So go ahead and relay that back since they can't hear you.
Yeah, so thinking about our guidelines for building content in high fidelity, both the content that we're exploring in avatars. We have documentation that's constantly being updated. We also have some tutorials, both in videos and how-to guides that we have on our website. So if people are looking to explore what the capabilities are and what some of the guidelines are, going to our documentation page. We have an API docs page, and then we also have sort of a getting started general documentation. It's all searchable, and that's what I would recommend.
One of the things that we're standing in right now is kind of like the covering over Nefertiti's tomb, or actually you call it Nefertari's tomb, which I guess that's also Nefertiti, right?
No, they're different queens.
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah.
I guess I've been saying it wrong all this time. Bad on my part. Jeez. It tells you how much history I have behind me. Okay. So, Nefertari's tomb, and from the appearance of it, looks very much like the tomb that's in the other SteamVR, what do I call it, simulation. And I also think I read that you were able to work with them at least to create or maybe get the mesh model from them originally. Is that true? And then you've kind of refined it, or is this all your own content now?
So we originally were working with CuriosityStream and the people that created that photogrammetry version that you can find in the Oculus store, and maybe other
the Steam VR as well.
Steam VR as well, which is very cool. And that's where we started. We couldn't really work out something with CuriosityStream, so we looked elsewhere. And what we ended up finding was a gentleman who lives in Russia. I'll call him he's the main creator, but he has a site called, I believe it's nefertaritomb.com. So if any of your listeners are interested, but it's just a passion project that he and a group of other passionate people have been working on for almost 4 years. And we discovered him on Sketchfab, where a version of the tomb that you went through yesterday can be explored on Sketchfab.
I actually have seen that, so that's very interesting.
So we reached out to him and we said, look, we've been through a version of this that is, a photogrammetry version, but yours is beautiful. Would you be interested in working with us? And he very graciously agreed to allow us to use it and have tours go through it. And so we worked with him, and like I said, because it's using common file formats, we were able to fairly quickly, within a couple days, get all of that hard work with him and his team into high fidelity. And then we began reaching out to Egyptologists. We had met one who had done tours for us before, sort of a test, and we met two others, all who are UCLA graduates. And so now we have all three of them giving tours on a weekly basis. And, I, like you, anybody that wants to go to the Steam download of the CuriosityStream version, that one's glorious, and I totally encourage people to do it because they can see it as it actually is right now as a ruin. The one that we have is built off of all of this historical data of what it would have looked like when it was finished. And so to go through that as it's almost brand new, and then to do it with, as you experienced, an Egyptologist who can just talk about every single thing that's in there almost forever, It's just so wonderful to be with a group of people, and then you hear their questions, and sometimes they ask questions that you wish you had asked, and it's just, I found it to be a much a richer experience than exploring it on my own, even though the version that's on Steam, is beautiful. It's a little lonely, I would say.
Well, agreed. And if I can give my own impression, so having experienced it and actually used it in a presentation myself, yes, it's somewhat sterile, even though they did a very good job. Lighting is excellent, and it really makes you feel like you're part of it. The automatic, as you get close to something, be able to point something and just getting a voice. We've seen that already in museum. And It's always kind of nice to have an actual expert, which, as we know, museums hire because that's important, and they probably had one at the OMSI as well. Now, the expert that was with me yesterday, the name sounded familiar. Is this the one that you've had previously, or is this a new Egyptologist that was doing the presentation?
You were with Bethany, I think, right?
I think so, yeah.
She's new, yeah.
Okay.
And she's got a PhD, and I've been through a couple tours with her, and she's just fantastic. I just learn something new every time I go down there with her.
And that's the important thing, is it's dynamic.
Yeah.
So if a audience member or whoever's on the tour has a question, obviously she's a wealth of knowledge. More importantly, she has a lot of information that I think a lot of people are curious about, and she didn't seem to hold back, other than, for instance, I mentioned yesterday, she talked about the Egyptian sexuality, which, kind of is like a lot of modern day sexuality in some respect, and with all its problems as well. And it was very interesting to hear these kind of things that you may not get out of strict formal research information, because as you talked about earlier, if this is a published book, you have to be concerned about your audience. So having, obviously we're all adults and we all appreciate the information. And again, it wasn't anything with raunch or anything. It was just basically information that I think a lot of people are curious, and I really like that component of it. And that's where this really is astounding, because as we alluded early in this conversation, you, to me, are human.
Yeah, we're here.
Exactly. And I
Together.
notice your hands have gestures. I don't know if you're controlling those or this is part of your algorithm, so that when we talk and so forth, our fingers continue to move. Now, mine may not move because I don't know any of the features. I guess I should do. But I notice yours change, your gestures, when you point and so forth. It all seems very natural. And the fact is that you are looking at me and nodding your head in confirmation as I'm talking. These are extremely great features, and to have an expert who's also nodding their head or confirming or pausing before talking. And the fact is, if I look at the camera, my lips are moving right now as well as yours, and they're synchronized to I don't know what you're using for your algorithm, allophones or something, but they move as though you are speaking from your avatar. And the fact is that I'm having a natural conversation with you, speaks highly in volumes of what you've been able to create so far. So,
yeah, and we didn't touch upon this earlier, but the other thing that's very different about our platform from some others is it's wonderful that the two of us can be here, but we've held events where, almost 500 people are around each other in a single domain. It's not sharded where you've got, 50 people in a version and then 50 people in another version and 50 people. You're talking about 500 people all around each other experiencing the same thing. And so it's just so glorious to be, present in that, where you can walk and talk to new people from around the world and then walk over there, and you really feel like you're in a pretty special place. And then to touch upon something that you were mentioning earlier about Bethany, it's been consistent that every tour I've done with her, the other thing that's great is people ask questions that aren't necessarily related directly to Nefertari's tomb. Mm-hmm. They want to riff off of something that's sort of generally about Egypt, or maybe it's more modern day, or maybe it's older than Nefertari. And she, again, is so knowledgeable that she's able to kind of go where the group wants her, to go. And so, again, differently than reading a plaque that's like, this thing is, this, she can kind of riff off of that. And that is so wonderful and different, and why we think, VR will kind of really disrupt education in a way, because, we'll be able to get access to expertise and be able to get access to sites that normally, we wouldn't. Maybe some of us that live in large cities might have access to some of those things, but VR will allow people that live everywhere to be able to get access to those places and those experts. And that's why we're so excited about virtual reality and education.
Well, and speaking of that, we did touch on some of the subjects, probably because of my technical perspective on things, of what 3D fabrication and scanning is already doing, allowing us to go in and scan artifacts and close them up and keep them sealed or protected, but then giving us the opportunity through VR or even actual 3D fabricating things. And some people complained at the OMSI because the King Tut display, many of those were replicas, and they said, well, where are the originals? And she made the point that Egypt no longer allows, which I respect is the proper thing to do in any country, keep them within and keep them protected. And because of our ability to 3D fabricate to such detail, people shouldn't complain. You're seeing something, either as we may get a touch on it, we're going to go down there in a second, but you've basically refurbished it, that's a good choice of words, to its original glory, even though you can look at what it looks like now. So we have the opportunity to put it back to the way it looked, or looked at it as it was before, but all through this technology that we're wearing on our heads, and as we know, is improving monthly, yearly, and you're probably aware CES is going on right now, and there's some new, not necessarily technology, but improvements that HTC has identified, and also Oculus with their independent headset.
The Quest,
I think is really going to change it, because you're going to get what we're doing now in an open area, for far less than what it's cost in the past. $400 is just going. I think it's going to open this all up.
Yep.
Well, I'll stop my ranting. Why don't
Great.
you kind of sneak me down there and
All right,
let's kind of
head
look
down.
through the door. Okay.
Yeah.
How do I do that?
Okay.
Okay. I like the camera. I feel like I'm in the 23rd or 4th in some of those movies where they just had a mobile camera.
Yeah, so let's go head down the ramp here.
Now, one thing I noticed, I have to actually hold my touchpad down, right? Oh,
yeah, to move, you got to hold the touchpad down, like your left one. Your left pad, if you push on the top, you'll move forward.
Oh, well, that actually
Or you
makes
can just
me a
use
little...
teleport. Right, yeah, so if we walk into this teleport area here, we'll head down into the tomb.
Okay. I don't know, it's scary. So I noticed that my textures are, and hopefully the camera's here to record me, but I noticed the textures had to be loaded as I was coming in. So for those of you who are watching this, give it a little moment before trying to zoom in. They do all come in, and just wow. And for those of you who have actually experienced the Steam VR version of this, where everything seemed old, this looks brand new, but I'm seeing very nice diffused textures as well as bump or normal mapping. And I don't know if there's any gloss or other features, specular, but it looks very real. And the shading is very realistic. I like the special effects, the smoke and the particle effects.
Yep. The other thing that you might be able to hear is in this room you can hear some reverb. And again, our platform gives you an affordance to sort of create volumes that you can define attenuation zones and reverb settings. So the attenuation would be, you know, as I move away from you, it's going to fall off faster or slower. Those things are really important depending on how many people you have in a space.
I was actually going to make that point, sorry for interrupting you earlier, is that, yes, immersive audio is extremely important, and you kind of captured that as well. I did notice, though, that if somebody is a certain distance from you, like in normal life, they attenuate and either get closer to them or turn up the volume on your system. But yes, the fact is that you have ambience, you have reverb, as we're hearing now, just adds to the quality of the immersive experience. And it was cool to hear not only your voice now with reverb, but when the Egyptologist was speaking earlier, the same thing. So I really felt like I had that person in this environment as though it were all real, except I'm in a comfortable climate. Right. And the other thing I want to touch on is disability. Now, I have the ability, not full mobility, but if somebody doesn't, they could be seated in their wheelchair or a stationary location or even in bed, and still, because you have a teleport feature or the gliding capability, still to be able to participate. And most importantly, let's say you're disfigured or disabled to the point that you feel an embarrassment, that's no longer an issue here because you can represent yourself either as younger, older, or whatever you want, and then there's no stigma there as well. So this gives people a perfect opportunity to move out and explore.
Absolutely. And here, speaking of avatars, is Queen Nefertari sort of captured in a version of herself, I'm sure, forever.
I made that point
at a certain age. Yeah.
It's funny how we're avatars and perceiving avatars millenniums ago.
Yeah.
So I don't know about you. I think we've kind of wrapped everything else. If you have something to kind of invite people, because this is open right now. You can sign up for this. I think it's free. Is that correct?
It is free. You can go to Eventbrite or even highfidelity.com, and there'll be a link off our own website to get to the Eventbrite page. Right now, we've got 4 tours a week going. And we might increase that depending on people's interest. We sold out of all the ones in January almost immediately. You can only get so many people down here at one time because it's kind of small. So, like 15 is a comfortable number for the Egyptologists to tour people around. But I absolutely encourage people to take this. It's free. It's wonderful. It's absolutely a fantastic VR experience if you're looking for a new one. I would also encourage people listening to check out our platform and learn about how they might be able to become creators, because I think, like I was mentioning earlier, there's a lot of opportunity here for people to come in and learn how to build on high fidelity and then make money in the future. I think the possibilities are endless, and it's a great time to sort of get in on the ground floor.
I totally agree with that. And so, obviously, the future, we have this one. Do you have something else planned?
Well, because we've had such success with this build and with pairing it with, Egyptologists, we're actively looking for something that's similar to this. And we've got some people that we're talking to about recreations of ancient Rome and ancient Greece, but we've also done things like just world arts and cultures, where somebody tours people through kind of an old Korean house, and gives people an idea of Korean etiquette and how to draw Korean characters and Korean clothing and old Korean food and things like that. So we really think that we'll continue in the next couple quarters to look for opportunities like this, and again, using the model of finding the expert and having them talk about their passion to a group of people really is, I think, what we're going to do. Because, again, it's about, making VR more human. So it's about connecting people more than anything, together.
And you just addressed the point. I've got hands, and I've got, even though they're controllers, I can touch things and manipulate things. And we didn't even expand upon that you could interact, as you talked about actually learning to draw Korean characters. Didn't think of that you have another component there instead of just your eyes and ears.
That's right. Yeah, we can all build and do things collaboratively in real time here. It's not go off to your authoring tool, make changes, upload. Here we can just do it together.
Well, great. And you know what? Because I must be getting older. The name is Ryan, is that correct?
It is, yeah.
Oh, shoot, not too bad. So, Ryan, I really appreciate you giving me the tour. I am blown away. As mentioned, I've had an opportunity to work with some other systems, and they're just evolving. And I think this is the future of VR, and I think people need to explore it and take some of these tours. This is a perfect one to start at. And again, Ryan, thank you. And signing off, All Things 3D. I wish I could just poof, but...
Well, it was great to meet you, and thanks for taking the time. Yep.
Okay, bye. Oh, no, I have to figure out how to get out of here. I'm stuck. No, you're trapped. That's a Black Mirror episode.